Good afternoon, good evening to those of you who have decided to watch today's pod, this week's pod. Let's raise it up a little bit, give you a slightly better angle there. No live pod this week, no live guest this week. Essentially, what's going on is just all of the potential guests. Everyone had conflicts, and we won't make Mr. Kirshner try to do the pod the week of his wedding. That would not be fair to him, nor his fiance, or his mental or physical health. So we won't do that, and instead we're going to just chug along here as if it's a solo show. I know that many in the league would prefer a guest, but that's all right. We're just going to do it that way. Just to start off, obviously we've had a bunch of trades in the last day or so, really shake up the composition of the league, or certainly some of the teams at the top. We'll certainly get into the week 5 that was, the week six that could be. We have to start with these trades, these monumental trades, just to sort of start off. I mean, really, where to begin? LaMagna got it going really before week 5. LaMagna got it going before week 5 with the Joe Mixon for a third round pick. Interestingly enough, about this offer, LaMagna and Evan played each other last week, and we sort of saw that all go down. We saw what was going to happen there. And essentially, what we saw, right? I think what we saw is you can acquire Joe Mixon and his high usage, high opportunity, perhaps high floor but low ceiling fantasy results. I mean, we'll get into that matchup a little bit more, but suffice it to say, Joe Mixon did not deliver for LaMagna last week. And then, of course, yesterday we had just a number of massive trades. We first had LaMagna and Bodson get together on really a huge deal. LaMagna acquiring Geno Smith, Dalvin Cook, T. Higgins, and Travis Kelce for a 6th-rounder in next year's draft, as well as a first and second in 2024. Interestingly, if you look at this, you would have thought that perhaps Bodson could have got more, or should have got more, or certainly demanded more. Kelce coming off that monster 4-touchdown game, the number 1 tight end. Only difference between Kelce and Andrews this year is touchdowns, which is just a Monday Night Football. You would have thought would have really driven up that value for Kelce. Geno Smith, of course, the number 5 overall quarterback so far, which LaMagna really needed to improve. So an interesting trade. I think Bodson probably could have got a little bit more. And then LaMagna had a drop. Jared Goff was on bye, Josh Reynolds, and Gerald Everett. Interestingly, Bodson didn't want to acquire players back in the trade. I do think that may have saved him some of the waiver wire angst and anxiety that he probably went through going through waivers this week. But c'est la vie, that's how it went down. Now, LaMagna, noticeably here 5 weeks into the season, sits 2 games back of in the division behind my team. And so this trade certainly helps him immensely. I mean, it gives him a weekly startable quarterback, an elite tight end. It gives him potentially an elite receiver if Higgins can get over the injury and the Bengals offense can figure out its issues. And Dalvin Cook, who certainly is a top 15 running back so far this year, coming off a huge game, hasn't been great outside of last week's 2-touchdown performance. So we'll see how that all plays out. Not necessarily in response, but certainly there's a little bit of keeping up with the Joneses. I went out and made a deal with Jacobs for Najee Harris and Jahan Dotson, who has some nice keeper value and has played well when he's been healthy. And my first and second round picks next year for DeAndre Swift, Jamar Chase, and a 3rd-round pick next year. I think it's relatively fair, commensurate value. Najee Harris really been terrible. And Jahan Dotson has some nice keeper value if he keeps panning out and finding the end zone. And for me, it's really, chasing this season. I needed to upgrade at running back without a doubt. Getting an elite receiver, potentially an elite receiver, is definitely a plus. And an early pick that, could be something. And for Jacobs, that's 4 picks in the first 2 rounds, and really the ability to load up and really make a run next year behind Justin Herbert. So really good trade for both owners if you decide that you're kind of going to punt and punt early and get maximum value, which is what Jacobs did. And then, interestingly, made one more deal, feeling like really when I looked around and I surveyed the other three really high quality teams in terms of rosters right now in the league, noticing that the one area where I truly lacked and was deficient and was weaker was at running back. And so not a lot of opportunity to make a big blockbuster deal, particularly once I dealt my first and second round picks. And so ended up making a trade with Paul to acquire Kenneth Walker for the third round pick acquired from Jacobs. I feel like it's a necessary deal to get what could be a top 15 or top 10 running back the rest of the year. For Paul, we could sit here until we're blue in the face to discuss how Paul views a player's value and determines trade value. Just because someone trades away a first or second round pick and now you want a third round pick for a player, doesn't like the player has a stagnant value at a particular moment in time. The value is not fluid based on what assets someone has. They either have the assets to make a deal or they don't. So for Paul, he just wants maximum picks at the highest level for every player. Not always doable, not always reasonable. This one, perhaps a little bit of a stretch on both sides, but the deal got done. So that's a lot of deals in the last day or so. Some strong feelings, if you had to do trade grades, I'd say LaMagna certainly gets an A because of the amount of players, the quality of players this year, punting on 2024 early picks, but there's a whole year to recover all of that. At the same time for Bodson, left some value on the table, so probably somewhere like a B. The Mixon for a third round pick is probably a solid B all around. Maybe for Evan an A- because he gets a good pick. I don't think Mixon would have been worth a 1 or a 2. So for LaMagna that works out well, but I don't think Mixon is the elite running back that Matt needs. The trade with Jacobs, frankly, I think for Jacobs that's an A+. He gets really 2 top picks. Really going to really set himself up well. For me, just in a vacuum, it's probably a B+. You had to give up a lot to get a lot. At the same time, there's no guarantee that Swift and Chase deliver. And then the Kenneth Walker deal is for Paul, probably an A-. I'd give myself about a B+. I think it's one of those deals where if you feel like, hey, I want this player and I need this player, you make it, but it's not necessarily the best situation. So in the chat, someone wants to know what I trade Waddle for Mixon. I don't know. In a PPR league, would I trade Waddle for Mixon? No, I'd keep Waddle. I think Tua will be back week 7. And frankly, once Tua is back, that Miami Dolphins offense should be much improved. Mixon, I don't think is really worth a lot in a PPR league because he's very touchdown dependent. He might get a lot of catches, a lot of opportunity, a lot of usage, but you have to find the end zone for him because he doesn't have breakaway explosive ability. So I would not trade Waddle for Mixon, but I would trade Mixon for Waddle, if that makes any sense. Turning back to the league, we saw last week the 2 heavyweights, right? The 2 undefeated teams, Joe and I, match up. Really an exciting kind of matchup. Really, came all the way down to Monday Night Football. If you look at it, Joe really did a great job of this lineup. 91% coach rating. For me, 85%. Frankly, leaving Marquise Brown on the bench and over Christian Kirk really didn't pay out. Not really the right move, but we saw Daniel Carlson deliver Monday Night Football. We saw Clyde Edwards-Helaire almost get a touchdown, but just do enough there. And by halftime, it was over, and I could go to sleep in order to wake up in the middle of the night when the baby decided to, wake and stir. So it was quite nice to be able to come from behind Sunday night with Mark Andrews delivering, about 18 points, and then on Monday Night Football getting, that whole final batch of points. So really fun little matchup there. Looking around the league elsewhere, nothing truly remarkable I mean, I think we've just seen Tate just really struggling on the year, just really struggling last week, particularly bad. LaMagna needing a win against Evan to keep pace in the division, got walloped. Joe Mixon did nothing. If we just go ahead and take a quick peek at that matchup, I mean, Mixon 10 points, okay. But besides Kupp and the Cowboys defense, Matt got no help. And on the other side, Niners defense outpaced the Cowboys defense. And between Mike Williams having a big game, DK Metcalf continuing to deliver with Geno Smith, and of course, Breece Hall's big day. I mean, Evan just really ran away with it with a really, really nice performance. The biggest surprise, though, I'd say on the week was Drew. I mean, Drew put up almost the most points in the league, just fell a tiny bit short. But Jacobs really delivered Monday Night Football. Eckler, Henry, and we'll break that down more. But you have 3 of the top 5 fantasy running backs. You're going to be in every matchup. And for Drew, we'll get into this in a little bit, but make a trade. I mean, go out and get a receiver, go out and get a quarterback. I mean, my God, this is a team that has the assets to certainly be in the playoffs, certainly to be competitive behind those 3 running backs. And just to quickly, highlight, I don't think it's a shock, that Paul lost. Jacobs just, man, it's been a rough. It was a really rough week to lose to Justin, with Justin barely breaking 90 points, but that's how it goes. Wagner gets a nice big win. So it was really a solid week. We saw 5 of the 6 winners score over 127 points. That's definitely a really strong week from everyone. But I want to touch one more thing on the trades that we had happen. We had our resident PR guru, Mr. Jacobs, did put out a press release. It's titled "Statement from Ownership on Lazard People 2022 Season and Roster Moves." This comes from 35,000 feet, courtesy of Delta Airlines. This is a million-mile member with this nice press release, and I'll read it here for you. The team currently known as Lazard People is proud to confirm the execution of a landmark trade with League Commissioner Lowell Carr, the owner and GM of the league's current first-place team, Rusty's Happy Ending. Our organization is proud to have been party to this groundbreaking transaction. This happens anytime 2 Jews find their way to the table. This was a negotiation for the ages, and I like to think the outcome of this clash of the Titansburgs was a real win-win, says owner, general manager, and team pilot Jonathan Jacobs. Should Mr. Carr and his team go on to win the league championship, history will certainly see our organization as having played a pivotal role. Really, a part of that trophy will be ours. The commissioner's office has not provided any statement at this time, but is expected to address the transaction on a forthcoming episode of their news program, The Pod. Reactions from around the league were slow to come in, highlighted by a less than notable reaction from defending champion Matt LaMagna, who called the trade an intriguing one, while fielding calls to commend his team's own transaction, which of course brought Dalvin Cook, T. Higgins, Travis Kelce, and former New York Jet and jaw punchy Geno Smith to his organization. The day was capped by a second trade from Mr. Carr, who acquired Kenneth Walker from Paul Bielingmeyer's Albuquerque Ass Farm for a 3rd-round pick. Said Mr. Bielingmeyer, "I'm excited to win the payout for most deals completed. It is unclear if Mr. Bielingmeyer was being sincere. We may never know. Though the deal is a positive step for the Ass Farm, which is still financially recuperating from Mr. Bielingmeyer's failed attempt to open an actual functioning dairy farm, a classic misunderstanding about what a farm means in the context of a sports organization, it is unknown if Mr. Carr also acquired dairy cows as part of this deal. Can only hope that I get a dairy cow out of this deal." Lazard People is continuing its benevolent run of deal-making by making several other members of the team available for transactions, all of whom are excited at the prospect of serving the greater good of the team's future. Among them, quarterback Kirk Cousins, who believes he is worth a pick in the top 5 rounds of the draft. No comment. Running backs Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, a dynamic duo in a resurgent offense. Running back Damian Harris, who is down but not out. I'd like to add there that he is out for at least a few weeks. So Ramondre Stevenson should do nicely filling in and starting for me. Running back Elijah Mitchell, who is prepared to turn the dial to 11 upon his return from IR. Receivers Allen Lazard, the team's namesake, and Adam Thielen, who both exist in the NFL. Teams around the league have had reactions to the availability of this talent, if you can call it that. Said Evan Carr, owner and operator of McFearless, what on earth is this trash? These are currently a bunch of men who play football in the National Football League, said perennial contender and Bukayo Saka lunch owner Joseph Richmond. So Richmond has been silent on the trade market, instead relying on his team's track record to attract talent. Said Jacobs, they can't all be winners, but we're going to make some moves. Stay tuned. Going to be fun to watch. And so, I want to first thank Mr. Jacobs for sharing that delightful press release from, again, 35,000 feet and the spotty Delta Wi-Fi with all of us. But it's going to be interesting, as we return to the focus of this propaganda vehicle to discuss my team and my team exclusively. But in all seriousness, we want to look ahead, right? We're 5 weeks into the season, still a lot to be played, a lot can happen. Really, injuries, suspensions, and poor performance, tough matchups, everything is still possible. Looking ahead to week 6, there are some really good matchups, just when you think about point projection. Evan and Wagner face off. Whew. Right now, a 7-point difference in the projection. It's certainly possible that Evan beats Wagner. I don't know if it will happen. I think we're going to have to see Brandon Ayuk finally do something. But DK Metcalf should be in a shootout and should put up points in Arizona. I would expect Breece Hall and Miles Sanders to continue to play fairly well. I don't know what Rodgers will do. The Niners defense should help Evan by terrorizing the Falcons. And for Wagner, sure, he's got Mahomes. Mahomes will be in a shootout with Josh Allen on Sunday afternoon, so that should help. But I don't know that you can depend on Saquon Barkley to have a big game against Baltimore. And because of the Raiders' bye and Devontae Adams' potential suspension, Wagner's left starting both Eagles receivers, A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, against the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. That would be a tough matchup. And so there's certainly a chance here that Evan goes into Sunday night with a lead and maybe into Monday night with the win before Mike Williams and the Chargers kick off against the Broncos. So certainly an interesting matchup there. Of course, we'll see how I do against Paul. I'm not going to have a kicker, so it should be fun. I'm projected to win by 37 points without a kicker, so hopefully it's not much of a challenge. But we'll see. It's certainly possible that stranger things can happen. There's a couple of teams, Drew and Justin, who need to fill out their lineups. Definitely with buys and things, it will be tough for Drew with a lot of those running backs hurt, but he's playing Manny. Manny's not that great. Opportunity for Drew to get to 3-3 and really start to take a little bit more of a closer step to the playoffs. Between Jacobs and Bodson, I don't really want to pay attention to that slap fight between two teams that have essentially thrown in the towel on the season, but it could be a big one when it comes to consolation bracket seeding and what that might mean for the number 1 overall pick. You might want to sell assets, but not be so bad you take yourself out of the running for the number 1 pick, unless you're okay having the number 2 pick. So it will be an interesting rest of the regular season. But I want to touch on, before we go, a couple of teams here that really have a lot of opportunity. There's still plenty to play for, plenty that can happen. They're in the playoffs or on the cusp of the playoff projections right now. We'll work our way down. We'll start with Manning, 5th-ranked team right now in the league, 3-2. But this is a team that's really not that far off. Probably needs 1 or 2 receivers to really be competitive. And I would suggest, Manny, that you come trade for some of the plethora of receivers on my team. But between Kyler Murray, Kamara getting healthy, Kareem Hunt should be good most weeks, Lockett being a top 10 receiver so far this season, Tyler Higbee playing well, as long as Stafford plays well. There's definitely pieces there for Manny to be competitive. So he's only really 1 or 2 moves away from being a little bit stronger. And all you got to do is get to the playoffs. We've seen before. It's not the best team that necessarily wins it all. Sometimes teams just get hot, get lucky. That's all you need. You got to be in the playoffs. Manny right now is projected to be in the playoffs, but he needs some help. So if I were Manny, I would think about making a move to upgrade at receiver and see what else maybe you can do. The 6th place team, Drew, as I already mentioned, 3 of the top 5 fantasy running backs. It's quite impressive. Eckler, Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry. Really a fantastic set of running backs. Of course, Henry almost just about running out of keeper value. Eckler can't be kept next year, and Jacobs could be, but let's see how the rest of the season plays out in that respect. At the same time, for Drew, Pittman and the Colts offense is really underperformed and left a lot to be desired. And Brandon Cooks has also struggled this year as well. And so for Drew, if he can upgrade a receiver, and of course Cortland Sutton will come off the bench this week, there may be something there. He would need to upgrade a Russell Wilson at quarterback, or at least get Wilson to play much better. Although with the shoulder issue, that's not a guarantee. So for Drew, it's really a situation where upgrading at receiver is going to make a huge difference because those three running backs are going to keep him in games. Not this week with Henry, Jacobs, and Cooks on bye, but normally once he gets past week 8 and the running backs are done on their buys, Drew's going to be very competitive. And so I would recommend or suggest, look, you have a chance to be in the playoffs. You have a chance to steal some, most points in a given week. Go for it. Take a shot. On the flip side, number 7 overall team right now, by the ranking is Evan. A little bit of a shock considering he traded away Mixon. But really, this is a team that is only being held back by Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Breece Hall is now a top 10 running back. Miles Sanders, top 12. Mike Williams, number 11 receiver. DK Metcalf, the number 17th receiver. And so if Evan can get some better play out of Brandon Ayuk or upgrade at receiver, certainly a quarterback. There's no reason he can't be a playoff team. No reason he can't compete. He doesn't need a lot. He needs a receiver. He might need a backup running back as well. But those are things that are very possible. And frankly, when you think about it, he's got an extra third-round pick to work with, and he's got a lot of potential here. He's got assets. He's got good players. It's not going to maybe blow you away, but it's a competitive team. It's a team that could be in the playoffs. And then, as we've seen year after year, anything is possible. Now, for Justin's the number 9th ranked team, and the reason we won't highlight the number 8th ranked team is because, frankly, if we look at Jacobs' team after the trades that he's made, it's just simply gonna crater. It's gonna sink, and I think he knows that. But for Justin, who we wish him congratulations, best of luck on the wedding this weekend. Try to enjoy every single moment. If you have the opportunity to watch this before it goes by very quickly, just try to enjoy the moment with you and your soon-to-be wife. But for Justin, he's got Lenny Fournette. If Brady's going to start to play better, Godwin's going to start to play better. Tua's going to come back and help Waddle. Dobbins should get better, should get healthier, and start to produce a little bit more. This is a team that, outside of the buys decimating it this week without Jamal Williams, the Texans defense, or Hawkinson, this is a solid team that at least is going to be a team you can't overlook if you get matched up against them. He's got McLaurin on the bench, Judy on the bench, so those are potential solid options. And, of course, Jonathan Taylor, the number 1 overall pick, who just hasn't delivered yet this year. And so the recommendation that I would say for Justin is think about what positions do you need to upgrade or feel like you want to upgrade. And if you do, what's the ceiling? I mean, certainly potentially to be in the consolation and win the number 1 overall pick again, but why not make a run for the playoffs, see if you can win it all? So those are 4 teams I wanted to highlight. It's interesting, as we've talked about, Bodson and Jacobs trading away a lot. There's really not much to talk about there. For Tate, it just really hasn't gone his way. The running backs just haven't panned out. Paul, that is what it is. But, for Eric, he's got Lamar Jackson, James Robinson, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Tucker. I mean, he's got assets. Whether or not he wants to do something with that or just play for the number 1 overall pick in the consolation bracket, that's up to him. I think, we'll see. We'll see how Tate's pivots. But right now, it's hard to see unless Kenny Pickett really turns the Steelers passing game around. I don't know that Eric has the receivers with the type of ceiling he would need to really compete. And of course, Kyle Pitts has underperformed. Michael Thomas has been hurt. And then Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson, and Matthew Stafford have all really disappointed. So that's kind of just a touch on the league this week. Give everybody some thoughts, something to perhaps listen to in the car or not. It's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the regular season plays out, what other trades can or be made, and what other people will decide to contend, how injuries affect. We're only 5 weeks in. There's going to be other injuries. There's going to be other things that pop up. So it's going to be interesting. I'm excited to see how it all plays out. And So if you have tuned in, um, you know, thank you and enjoy. It's going to be a fun one. We'll see how it all keeps going.